Soundstripe.
Welcome to South End Supporters Presents Red versus Blue, your weekly Premier League series. Eric Cole alongside the Monday morning center back Dave Wyckoff, and a new series that we're introducing to the show here. Just a little bit, something new. Obviously, we've kind of teased this the past couple weeks with the Premier League season starting. And, this is something that Dave and I basically do off camera anyway. So we figured out, why not let everybody into our little trash talk that we do to each other each week? But before we kind of get into the bones of the show, Dave, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a little bit off-putting to have a middle-of-the-day recording when I guess technically I probably should be paying more attention to my day job, but, it is what it is. Football never stops, and we're in just a glorious time of year, and to piggyback on what you were saying, there was just so much more soccer that we want to talk about and we want to get into, that we need an extra creative outlet. And what better way to do it than, like you said, to take all the talk that we have on the outside of the South End supporters and bring it to Red versus Blue, which is, as we talked about before on South End supporters, is a double entendre in, obviously Eric's support of Manchester United, my support of Chelsea, but also a tribute to one of the greatest web short series ever, based on the game Halo and the characters in that, Red versus Blue. So this is going to be fun. I really like it. I think that, I hope that people like it. I hope that neutral listeners like it. I hope that we have some people that their only really exposure to being a football fan so far has been City, and I hope that we can help bring them along into the rest of the world of first English football, and then maybe, who knows, maybe in the rest of Europe as well. So no, I'm really excited. I'm glad we're getting to do this.
Yeah, I've found as we've kind of talked about our support for our clubs on the show regularly, we found other people enjoying little banter as well, throwing ourselves little things here and there. Spursy obviously comes to mind, where he'll let us know anytime that United loses that he'll quick to send us a tweet quickly there. And so I think it'll be a fun little thing, as well as it'll give us something to kind of keep everything and everybody engaged throughout the off season of the MLS season. That's prime time during the Premier League season. So yeah, as Dave said, Red versus Blue. I'm obviously Manchester United Red. Just a little backstory on, I've been supporting them since about 2003. And I remember going into high school. That was my first real exposure to any European leagues. In high school, we would have these things called pasta parties, where the night before a game we'd go to somebody's house and we would fill up on spaghetti and kind of carb load for the next day or whatever. And I remember just everybody on the team just seemed to have a team. And I was just always kind of behind, even getting familiar with teams. And back then, the only way you would really get exposure is if one of your friends had a Sky Sports membership to their cable. And it seemed like a lot of the guys that I had on the team had that, and they all had their teams. And so I remember going to a Soccer Master one day and just being like, I got to pick a team. And just this jersey just over my left here was the first jersey I ever it drew my eyes to it. I love the Vodafone logo, the Red Devils on the front. And I was just drawn to that jersey, and then kind of getting into finding about more names. Back then, Beckham was a global name at that point, and it was a name that I'd heard of, and so he played for the team. So I just naturally drew to United, and really have been regretting that decision ever since. No, but honestly, I lived a lot of great years when they were really solid, and hopefully things are coming back to light. But that's my backstory on me supporting Manchester United. Dave, how did you become a Chelsea fan?
Yeah, so just to build on your Man U, and I have a question for you before I get into that. Do you still have the Man U kit that I gave to you? God, it's probably been like 15 years ago now.
I do. I have like my, what I call my daily wears, which, because I have about, I would say almost like, I don't know, 30 plus. I think a couple years ago when I hit my like 20-year support, I laid them all out and saw them. But so like the ones like over my shoulders, and then there's some of the older ones that are a little bit more sentimental to me. I keep actually upstairs with all my shoes and everything, and I keep those kind of hung on a separate rack just so they're not getting, you know,
Yeah.
away from the kids, basically. So yes, I do still have those.
They
Yes,
probably,
it's
I mean,
still
they
very.
probably don't fit you either because I'm pretty sure they're mediums. So you'd probably
No,
be just
they
ripping
were
out of both of them.
no, I think they were larges actually. I think they
Nice.
actually do. And back then, it was more the looser style anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, they fit me great.
Yeah,
Across the board.
The Vodafone sponsorship Man U kits are always they always look so clean. The
Yes,
color scheme
yes,
was a little weird on a couple of those. White and navy, I think, is one of them, and then like red and navy.
yeah, yeah. Navy and red, like
Yeah,
a
it was
maroon
really
almost. Yeah, the
really
ones you gave me.
interesting. But I mean, hey, look now they each team has like 6 or 7 different kits that they use, and color schemes don't make sense. But my background as
Yeah.
a Chelsea supporter doesn't go back as far as yours, and a lot of it has to kind of do with what you were talking about. It was just access to games, and obviously we both played the game for a long time. I'm a little bit older than you, so in the early 2000s, there was the MLS wasn't huge, and the closest team to us was Kansas City and Chicago, and let's be honest, it was a lot worse product and a lot worse league then. So really didn't have a team to support. I knew about a lot of teams through playing FIFA, right, and through like
Yes.
watching the World Cup, and I was a fringe like Juve supporter for a while because I remember watching Alessandro Del Piero in a couple World Cups, and he was an Italian national, great forward. I have an Italy kit with his name on it up in my closet, so I kind of followed Juve as much as I could. It was more like follow them online, and then I remember when I was in college, their loss to Liverpool in the Champions League semifinal was one of the first big games I ever got to watch because we didn't have Sky and we didn't have Fox Soccer Channel. So that was kind of the thing for a while, take soccer where you can and watch more international than anything. And then I would say in like 2012 ish, I just kind of decided that I wanted to pick an English team because our friends had all picked them, and the game was starting to be shown a lot more on NBC Sports. And I think on 2015, I finally settled on Chelsea. I think I've told the story before. Our good friend Jake Hartwick has been a Chelsea fan for a long time, and Jake and I have always been close. And it just made sense to get on with a team with somebody that I was friends with. And yeah, I guess 10 years later, that first year they were terrible. That was Mourinho's last year, and then the second year they won the league. So yeah, hooray, hooray, beer, and that's my backstory. And it's funny now that we have City. Like I'm still a Chelsea supporter, right? But I view myself a lot more as a Chelsea supporter, but also essentially a neutral in that like while I pull for Chelsea to win, I don't live and die with Chelsea like my daughter does. Like I get irritated if they lose, and like I said, I would rather have them win than any other team. But I also find myself on Saturday and Sunday if Chelsea is playing, whoever, and it doesn't look like it's going to be an exciting game, I'll go find the most exciting game and watch that over watching a Chelsea game. Now, luckily, over the last half of this previous year, they've been pretty exciting to watch. But there have been years, and you know it, Eric, where it's kind of a slog to watch your own team. So that's my
Yeah.
background on being a Chelsea supporter, and yeah, I mean it's tough to not call myself a front runner, but it is what it is. In retrospect, I kind of do wish I had taken a little bit longer to choose, but then I'd probably would end up as like a Tottenham fan, and nobody just needs that on their soul.
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting point, though, you bring up. Like maybe we do have a lot of people that, are only familiar with soccer as far as the MLS and City. If they do decide to get into the Premier League, what would you suggest, with this opening weekend or just as their season goes on, if they don't have a team, maybe how they could go about, picking a team to support, rather than just going out and being, just the bandwagon front runner, like, what do you think you would look for if you were a neutral fan? You don't have a team now that you're going into. Would it be a star that you find exciting and that's tough nowadays because stars just don't commit to teams as much? Is it? Do you like the history of a club? Do you think they should look at that? What if you're a new fan coming into the league? What maybe would you look to attach yourself to help support a team?
So the way that I wish that I had done it now was I wish I had gone a full season to where I focused every week on a different club and watched that club and maybe learned about those clubs that were playing in that game before that game and the history and the players that they had and the managers and stuff like that. I kind of wish I had done it that way. I think that's a brilliant way to do it now, especially this year. And we're going to get into kind of predictions and things like that. But this year, more than any I can remember as really watching the Premier League, it's extremely competitive and wide open. Pretty much, there's a limited number of teams that we think can actually win the league. But as far as teams that can be like good teams and be competitive, legitimately, there are 12 teams that you could see vying for European spots. At least I could. 12 teams I could see vying for European spots next year. So playing in European competitions next year because of what they earned this year. So, I just think keep your mind open and, you know, try to check out all kinds of different teams and different styles because you're going to see, man, that's what I love about this league and this sport so much. Like, you're going to see such a crazy dichotomy of football being played, especially with, you've got three teams being brought up in promotion that were in the championship last year, is a completely different style of football and a completely different league and level of skill of the players. So I think the best way to do it was just pick a different team each week. You've got 38 weeks to watch. Pick a different team. Watch the derbies, man. Oh my God, watch all the derbies. Watch North London. Watch Merseyside. Watch West London. You know what I mean? Just watch them all. Watch every derby game that you can, because that is from a neutral's perspective, and embrace being a neutral for a year. That's maybe that's
100%.
Yep.
No, yeah, I love that advice. Honestly, just that last sentence, embrace being a neutral, because to me, it truly is the greatest league in the world, and you can really see some exciting things as just a neutral. And you'll like you said earlier, talking about Chelsea, watching their games, like you can check into some very fascinating games and not just get stuck into watching your team that is maybe going to struggle that week. The other thing I kind of mentioned, I wouldn't get too attached to players. Like if you're following a team because of players there, I wouldn't. You're gonna constantly be jumping ship, and it's just not as fun. I love the fact that you said read into the history, because to me that's super important to me, and I'm slowly becoming one of those fans that falls back on the history because of our great history and struggles in recent years, but. It does, it gives you that little bit extra investment into the team when you kind of know about that team, and then, when you're trying to come in as a neutral. So
don't get invested in managers either. Just throw that out there. Don't get invested in a manager.
Anything outside of the badge, don't get invested in, because what I'm learning this year is you can't even get invested in the lunch staff, because apparently they'll get fired just as quick anyway. So. Yeah, no personnel. But what I thought we'd do on this first episode here is just we'll run through the first week of games, just give a quick fire, who we think maybe will come out on top in that week. After that, we'll go through maybe who our predictions are for winning the league, relegation, top scorer, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit more of our own personal team prediction and that type of stuff. So we'll kick it off. League's kicking off this Friday with the reigning champions Liverpool taking on Bournemouth. To me, this one seems like it's Liverpool's year, and so I'm going to go with Liverpool coming out of that one.
Yeah, Bournemouth have had some major roster turnover, and they were actually a side that competed for Europe for a long time last year, and just kind of tapered off and just weren't really built for the long haul. Liverpool has done nothing but get better this year, and they might get better yet. There are some signings that are still kind of getting across the line before the transfer window ends, but I'm with you. Liverpool at Anfield, first game of the season where they're getting recognized with the trophy. I'm assuming there'll be a guard of honor from Bournemouth, right?
I would
imagine the Liverpool colors will officially don the cup, I think this is pretty easily Liverpool. Although the Community Shield game, they I don't I they look they look like a team that was a little bit rusty, but
Mm-hmm.
I fully think that they'll be fine. But there is an emotional element with celebrating a championship, and then the hangover from losing Diego Jota. So while I think Liverpool easily win this one, probably 2-0, something like that. There's a little bit of potential for maybe an emotional letdown.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that, but to me, it just seems they're too strong
Yep,
right now.
very good team.
Next, we'll go to Saturdays kicking off, and this first game to me is a real interesting one, back and forth. Aston Villa versus Newcastle. I think going into this year, if you paid attention at all to the transfers, Newcastle has had a disastrous transfer window all throughout the year. Just players falling out, players asking to leave, like Isak, who apparently came out today and said he's not going to play for anybody but Liverpool going into next year, which, I don't really like, all that type of stuff. I guess apparently he was promised something from the old owners, and now the new owners aren't wanting to keep up with that promise. I don't care. You're under contract with the club. You play for that club because you're the one who signed for that club for big money. But so going into this one, I would have said Newcastle. I don't know. Villa, throughout the years, they've had, really up and down. They've been real strong. They got a lot of good tools, but I haven't seen them add enough this transfer window for me to still put them over the line as far as this game goes. I think Newcastle's going to almost be playing with the chip on their shoulder also to try and show that, hey, that's fine. He can go out there and do that, but we're going to, still play our game and stuff like that. And then but the tough part is it's on the road at Villa Park. So, but I'm going to go in it's going to be a narrow game, but I'm going to give the edge to Newcastle.
Yeah, this is the first one that catches your eye when you say what sort of game would be attractive to the neutrals. This is the one. There's so many storylines in this game. Villa had kind of quiet off season. There's still some potential that they lose Ollie Watkins, which would be a disaster for them. Although it doesn't appear that there's anything imminent. Ollie Watkins being their leading scorer. They did add some supplemental. I think they learned a big lesson last year. They were in European play, and they just didn't have a deep squad, and it really kind of hit them hard down the end. They had a chance to be in Europe again on the last day by beating Man United, right? And they failed to do that and lost that spot. But they had a full summer. They had a full preseason. It's still a really good squad, and they've still got Unai Emery, right? Like the most important thing, maybe the best manager in the Premier League outside of Arne Slot for Liverpool. I think Villa will a strong showing at home, and it's just so tough to tell what you're going to get out of Newcastle this week. Like Eddie Howe's a great manager. They've still got a lot of talent even without Isak, but it's just. You've got to think that locker room right now is just kind of, questioning a lot of things. The ownership not really reinvesting in the team like they had been promised initially, and the fans got to kind of be, looking at the team and saying we were this close last year to being a contender, and we've done nothing to get better. In fact, we've gotten a lot worse. So. I have a feeling this game could potentially turn into a disaster for Newcastle. I think Villa's going to win. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being a laugher.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I know it's the early one, but that's as you said, the first game that really.
That's the pick of the game. That game is probably pick of the weekend for me. Looking at the matchups now, that's probably pick of the weekend from a neutral perspective. That's the one you want to watch, and you got to get up early.
Yeah,
6:30 Central Time. So set your alarms.
Yeah. Exactly. Next, we'll go to Brighton taking on Fulham. I think Fulham finished out the year real strong last year, and Brighton's still, especially if we can pull off a miracle and take Baliba from them, I just don't see enough pieces added. They've been that team that they remind me a lot of like a Crystal Palace, where for some reason they just show up against the big clubs, but it just seems like they struggle against games where they should be picking up those points early. Fulham had themselves a really good kind of tail end of the season, and really we're a strong contender. Kind of, you're always going to find Fulham. It just seems like if they stay in that consistency, anywhere from that 10-7 range, they're just real strong, kind of in that spot. I think going into the year, so I'm going to go Fulham taking the edge on that one.
That's really interesting because I always think of Fulham as much more of a home team than a road team. Brighton have been
Craven Cottage. Their place is still one of my.
Yes.
I wish we still. I mean, I understand it, from a ticket standpoint, but I truly miss the Highburys, the Craven Cottages, where those small, intimate stadiums where it just felt like the fans are just right on top of players. Yeah, it's one of my favorite venues.
Yeah, but traveling to the South Coast, first game of the season against a Brighton team that have had a lot of turnover, and to be fair, Brighton are a team that is set up for a lot of turnover, right? Their player development model right now is the best in England, one of the best in the world. To where they're turning over modest investments in quality players and turning them into big time sales for the club, and reinvesting in those same type of players to where they have set up to consistently be a back end of the top of the table, so a 6 through 10 team pretty much every year. But like you're right, it is so hard to do that every year and have to just turn over like the meat and potatoes of your lineup like they do every single year. I still think that at home they're probably set up for a victory, but I would not bet against Fulham. This game has also got early season kind of snooze fest written all over it. Although Brighton's not usually a team to play in a snooze fest, Fulham will. Fulham will pack it in and play for a 1-0 or a 0-0. But I have to give the edge, I think, to Brighton in this game. I think they'll find a way to pull it off.
Yeah, it's so tough, like this early season.
You have no idea what to expect.
No clue.
Because Brighton's going to run out a bunch of guys that are going to be younger and not have a lot of starts, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of them.
Yep.
Fulham will have the experience, although they did lose Tim Ream within the last season, right? Tim Ream went from Fulham to Charlotte. And Ream was one of the better center backs in England for a long time. So we'll see. It'll be exciting. I'm excited to see Anthony Robinson's next phase of his career in England, too. There was some interest in him from, I think, Liverpool and maybe Tottenham, too. And I don't know if that's still there. Probably not from Liverpool. But he's become a really dynamic player down that left side for them. So I watch a lot of Fulham.
I think even Bayern were a little interested in him.
Yeah.
He's getting a lot of national. I mean, they were putting him up there as one of the top left backs in the league, and that says something if you can put your name in that sort of stakes. Next, we'll go to one of the first new boys who were promoted, Sunderland, taking on West Ham. So Spursy's real team, even though we like to give him credit all the crap all the time. Sunderland, I thought, made some decent signings so far. It's always I feel like Sunderland might be that team that every year you get one of those teams that just newly promoted and they come out firing. It just seems like that, and then always about Christmas is when they start to kind of fade off. A lot of people are kind of thinking Sunderland may be one of those teams that, newly promoted, the excitement. It's almost like somebody on a marathon run that they come out in a sprint, and it's just like, all right, you're doing great now, but
That's
you're
a
going to
great
eventually
analogy.
fade off and stuff. So I think this will be an interesting one just because West Ham over the past couple years just, actually getting to watch them live in Chicago, just nothing really super impressive with them. Really relied on Bowen a lot last year. It's going to be – I just don't feel like they've really ever recovered since Declan Rice has left as far as, like, bringing in somebody to really truly uplift that team. So I think this one might be one of those, early shocks that we see coming out where I think, Sunderland could pull this one out. It's at the Stadium of Light. It's one of the most, famous, home atmospheres that there are. It's great to have Sunderland back in the Premier League because it was such a historic club for the Premier League for years. I think Sunderland might pull this one out. I think this might be a shock.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was not impressed by West Ham at all. For being a supposed big club, they don't act like one. kind of the forgotten club of London, of the big London clubs. You know, not to spoiler alert, but I think West Ham are in trouble this year. I think there's a real danger for them this year because they haven't gone out and made any legitimate moves. And, you know, if they don't start well, they could be in a world of hurt. So I'm picking Sunderland too. I think Sunderland ride momentum of promotion. You know, they did lose Joe Bellingham to Borussia Dortmund, and he was arguably their best player last year and helped them get through that promotion playoff. But I like the idea of this. If you're going to pick one of the three promoted teams to start hot, Leeds, Sunderland, or Burnley, Sunderland is the one that I think is probably the most likely to start hot. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think Sunderland find a way to get it done in front of the big crowd. I just don't. And this is not Graham Potter hate either. Like, Graham Potter is a fine manager. I just don't think that he's been set up with the tools to do much with West Ham this year. So I think Sunderland have it.
Yeah, there we go. Next, we'll go to Tottenham Spurs taking on other new boys, Burnley. I think Spurs. I think you know, they've lost a little bit of quality. They're still strong. They're just strong. I know Youngman's son went to LAFC, but obviously he was coming a little. Age was catching up to him. I don't think he was as much of a regular in the team, even though he's. I saw this. It was brought up the other day, and I find this interesting. And I'm curious to while we're on the topic of Spurs, who's the bigger Tottenham legend in your eyes, Youngman's son or Harry Kane?
Ooh, man,
Harry Kane never won a trophy
he
with
didn't.
his son did.
He didn't. I don't know.
You know, I know Harry Kane's got the goals, but if you're looking at it,
Yeah, that's
I
a
almost
coin
put
flip, man.
Son up there.
That's a coin flip because Son stayed along basically until he couldn't play at the highest level anymore, whereas Harry Kane bailed in his prime to go win trophies in a lesser league. So if you're a Spurs fan, are you buying a Sonny jersey or are you buying a Kane jersey? I think you're buying a Sonny jersey at this point. At least that's my perspective. It's kind of like it's kind of like I would anecdotally. Let's compare it to Cardinal fans. Are you going to buy a Pools jersey? Or are you going to buy a Yachty jersey? You know, who's more beloved in St. Louis? Who's the bigger St. Louis legend? It's Yachty.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Yeah, that's a great little comparison there. But I'm still going Spurs. I think Burnley's gonna. They added Kyle Walker, and I saw Dubravka from Newcastle, but both aging players.
Yeah.
I know they got a lot of experience, but I think Burnley's just that team every year that they're like a Norwich, where it's like up down. They come up and just never really seem to overly impress. They seem like that high quality championship team, and to me they're just always kind of going to be in that range.
Do you know how many? Where would you have? So Burnley were top in the championship last year. Mm-hmm. If you had to guess, where would you say Burnley finished in terms of goals scored in the championship?
I don't know. I didn't pay enough attention to them, and I don't know really their attacking line. Burnley, they won the championship outright, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it was more just they were the team that was just the longevity. Like they stayed consistent, I guess, in the championship. I think that was their big deal. I don't think they were necessarily blowing teams away. I think it was just they were consistent throughout, and I think that's kind of always been Burnley's model. I've never really, our buddy DH's, he loves to always give me shtick because the first game that he ever paid attention to for English Premier League was Man U, Burnley, and Burnley happened to win, and he would change my laptop background screen to Burnley Football Club sign this way every time he would borrow my laptop, and it drove me absolutely nuts. So there's always going to be a little bit of I hope Burnley just keeps going down for that reason.
So Burnley averaged a little over 1.3 goals per game last year in the championship and won 28 games. They only gave up 16 goals. The biggest challenge for them last year in a lesser division was scoring goals, and they didn't add any real goal scorers. So you're not going to be able to defend in the championship like you did, or you're not going to be able to defend in the Premier League like you did in the championship if you're Burnley. They're really going to struggle scoring goals against everybody all season. They're not a high spending team. They never have been. So I think it's going to be they're going to lose to Tottenham, despite Tottenham blowing the Super Cup and pulling the most Spursy move possible.
Spurs thing ever, yeah.
Yeah, how could you not? You win a trophy. You know, it's a quote unquote successful season. You sack your manager and then you lose the Super Cup. Like, it's been the most Spursy like last 3 or 4 months it could possibly be. So I thank everything that is holy that I didn't end up landing on that Spurs wheel when I picked my team, because good God, you have to be so committed. But week one,
Yep.
they're going to beat Burnley, and they've got some bids out for Savino from Man City and Eberechi Eze from Palace. I mean, they've made some decent additions to where they could legitimately be a mid-table to upper middle table team. But week one, it's Spurs over Burnley.
Yeah. Next, we'll go to Man City taking on Wolverhampton Wolves. I think City's going to have something to prove this year with in their terms, a not successful season last season, finishing third. So I think City's going to come out. I think a big thing for City this year is going to be trying to stay healthy. I know they lost De Bruyne. I'm trying to think of who else they've lost, but obviously City nowadays are the team that just always seems to have a full starting 11 for a team like Burnley just waiting in the background on the bench. So City's going to have something to prove. I'm gonna say this is going to be in Wolves. With losing Cunha, really just haven't brought in a lot this year. I think they're going to be one of those teams that I'm thinking is going to be in the relegation battle throughout the year. I'm thinking this game's going to be quite a thumping. I'm thinking almost like a 4-0 City. I think this is going to be a rough game for Wolves to start the season with.
So this is a strange one for me, because obviously I think that City are going to be the better team over the season, over the duration of the season, and Wolves, like you said, are probably going to be a bottom of the bottom half of the table team. But week one, City are likely to be missing Kovacic, Phil Foden, and Rodri. That's a huge part of that starting lineup, and they've made a few additions this year, and Pep is Pep. You would like to think after however many consecutive years of success that he has had, that he would be fine putting a competitive team out there, and maybe he will throughout the season. But the fact remains is that they put together some parts last year that didn't really quite fit together. And losing De Bruyne is arguably the biggest. The two main losses for teams this year that affect them most are Newcastle losing Isak and City losing De Bruyne. That I fully believe in that. Marmoush, Holland, Doku, Savino, like these guys are all top offensive players. Who's your engine room in City? You know what I mean? That's
If
you're
gonna have to
missing,
bring somebody to fill in.
yeah. I mean, they brought in Taji Randers from Milan, who was a great offensive weapon and a great setup guy for AC, but he's not much of a grinder. And Gundogan's still there, but he's old now. What are you going to get out of Phil Foden this year? I hate to bet against Pep week one, but man, that last season was such a disaster. I think Wolves come up with the upset in this one. It's just it's a weird game. It's a weird time. I think Wolves find a way. Maybe it's not a win, but I think Wolves at least draw a point out of this game.
Yeah, I mean, I could see either way going, either thrashing or just where you check in on the scores and you're seeing am I seeing this right? Where Wolves is up 2-1.
It's such
in
a
the 90th minute or whatever.
You said it earlier. Like week one, we know so little, and I think this is the most question marks that a City team has had coming in since Pep's been there.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like when you're one of these top bigger clubs, and there's so many more marketing things that they look to get out of preseason.
Yeah.
United did this whole U.S. tour,
Yep.
and there's a lot more travel involved. A lot of times where I almost feel like sometimes the bigger clubs, while the talent is such there, it takes them almost a little bit slower to get into that rhythm, just because they haven't had true. And the other thing too is they're more linked to these bigger names and their bigger purchases, where it takes a little bit of time for those players to either settle into a
Yep.
new system or settle in with those
Agreed.
players, and to where teams like City or Liverpool or United, all these big clubs that are it could be a rough couple rough month to get going, but I just with the way Wolves has been, I just don't. I see them. They were struggling last year with
Yeah, and that's listen.
relegation.
That's the smart pick. There's something off about City that has been there. Ederson's not likely to be their keeper week one.
Yeah,
They
are you
signed
seeing
James.
that?
They
That
signed James Trafford, and now they're talking about going and getting Donnarumma
Donnarumma.
potentially, which
Wild.
Ederson's fallen out of favor. There's something weird. Pep's contract is up in 2 years, and they're going through a rebuild, and they've got all those charges still hanging out there. There's something broken.
Yeah,
There's something broken in Man City right now.
That still drives me absolutely nuts.
Well,
that
yeah.
We're waiting on those charges. Next, we'll go to a fun one. Nottingham Forest taking on Brentford. I think both teams are going to have drop-offs from last year, especially Brentford losing Mbeumo, and as well Thomas Frank is their coach. I think Brentford's going to really kind of struggle, which has been wild over the past couple of years. Brentford's been a very strong team, and especially against the big clubs, they've been showing up. Nottingham Forest had a great last year. I believe they've only lost Elanga to Newcastle. So, not really losing much, but I don't know how much they've really truly added to their squad. But I just think they were such an exciting fun. Like, you want to talk about an exciting team to watch as a neutral. They're very young. They've got a lot of talent in that squad that I think is going to get better if they stay together. I think Nottingham Forest is going to go over on Brentford on this one.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to pick Brentford early on. You just lose so many pieces. You mentioned Mbeumo. Apparently, Wisa is also trying to get his way out there. One of their other top scorers. Losing your manager. They were a very much smash and grab team last year. They scored quite a few goals early on and then would hang on for wins and picking up points. But they're definitely a major candidate to regress. I still believe in that system and that core of players overall. And I don't know how Thomas Frank. He's an okay manager. They brought in Keith Andrews, who I believe was his assistant. He's an Irish guy. Who knows? Who knows what we'll see out of Brentford over the long haul. Forest started off with a bang last year, but definitely faltered down the stretch because it had been so long since they were in an actual race for Europe. And then through just a huge stroke of fortune for them, they get into the Europa League after the horrendous ruling against Palace by UEFA. They don't belong. They don't belong in the Europa League. They didn't earn it. They lost on the final day of the season, and it's just. I feel for Palace fans. It's huge letdown. Forest, like you said, they only lost to Langa, but I heard this morning that Morgan Gibbs-White wants out, and they're not entertaining any offers for Morgan Gibbs-White. So is he going to play like he doesn't want to be there? He clearly wants to cash in on his talent and name right now. I don't blame him. That could
I've seen reports though that they think they've got it figured out. He's going to be a Forest player.
That's good. And don't forget, there's a January transfer window to navigate too, eventually. So But I'm with you. I've got Forest in this game. I think that they're still the more whole team. The City Ground is so cool. Nottingham. I've never been to England. Nottingham it's just synonymous with England. The Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood and all that shit. But the City Ground is a great pitch. And I think Forest start off early with a win.
Yeah, I think Forest is going to have a good early season, but to your point, Europa, I don't think they got the depth
they don't have the
to be able to handle
it's going to be tough
all that type of stuff.
Yep.
Next, we'll go to last of the new boys, Leeds, and they're going to be going against Everton.
This is a Monday match,
Leeds,
by the way.
I'm saving our two
matches
for last. Leeds, always exciting.
Never dull.
Up and down.
Yeah.
You gotta love a Leeds. Everton, under Moyes towards the second half of that season, I thought became a much better squad, a little bit more rounded. Watching them in Chicago, they didn't look great. Against West Ham, just not great ball movement, nothing really clicking up top. But I think Moyes is just with his experience in the league, and he's such a great manager. It was one that I wish we would have gave a little bit more time at United. I think he's going to have this squad prepared and ready for the opening day of Premier League, where I think Leeds is still going to be, in that excitement mode. It's going to be. Let me see. I believe it's in Merseyside as well. Oh no, it's at
No,
Ellen Road. That's a big.
It's in Yorkshire.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a hostile ground.
Yeah.
And Leeds last 5 games on a win streak, all 5 games. I'm gonna screw it. I'm gonna go Leeds coming out with a narrow one goal victory in this one. I think at Ellen Road, that's such a tough place to go. And they put it as one of the top atmospheres in England. So I'm going to go Leeds coming out of this one with a 1-goal win.
We talk a lot about how City fans, St. Louis City fans, complain about signings and lack of money being spent, and oh, woe is me. And I'll just say it again. None of you have ever met an Everton fan, and it clearly shows. And this is yet another example. This season is going to be yet another example of why everybody needs to stop bitching and just recognize how good you have it, that you don't have to have a team that has to face relegation. Everton, to me, there's a really strong correlation, there's a really strong parallel between Everton and the St. Louis Cardinals in that they have such a history of being a quote-unquote large club that they think they still have to operate like a large club. Mm-hmm. And they go out and they make signings like they're a large club, but they're signings of players that are no longer quality and should no longer be playing for large clubs. Case in point, signing Jack Grealish to a £60 million deal when Jack Grealish is dust. He was dust before he got to Man City. He's never quite lived up to the billing that he had, coming out of being a younger player at Villa. Yeah, it's gonna get ugly in Everton in Merseyside before it gets better. Being away against a Leeds team that all they want to do is go and score. I think, in terms of stability, Leeds are not going to be a stable Premier League side. Daniel Farke has never been a successful manager at the Premier League level. He's much more of a championship manager. David Moyes is a much better Premier League manager. I just think his hands are tied behind his back with this one. And like you said, Ellen Road, lively crowd back in the Premier League. I loved watching Leeds. My love for Leeds grew a couple years ago when they had Bielsa, when Bielsa ball was a thing. That was great. This is a much lower gear version of Bielsa ball. I think Leeds win first week against Everton.
Yep. And then lastly, the last 2 games we'll go through is our own teams. So we'll start out with I find a real interesting one is Chelsea taking on Crystal Palace. You are at home with Stamford Bridge, but it's so funny how the one team that just always seems to be the thorn in your guys' side is Crystal Palace. For some reason, they always just give you guys a game. The thing with them though is, or this game in particular, is I have felt that you guys have just been on this trajectory up since probably the second half of last season. You guys have been real strong. You guys really kept a good core of your players. Nothing really too crazy. What was it? Menduke, and I think that was about it as far as big, outgoings.
Departures.
But he wasn't really a solidified person in your starting 11. I just think there's too much up in the air right now with Palace and a lot of their stars like Eze and all that going on. It's going to be on the road with all that going, and then you guys on this trajectory up, coming off the Club World Cup. That was more your preseason rather than a tour, which was a competitive preseason where you were still keeping everything, implemented and all the things that you were looking to get out. I think it's going to be, I think you guys will still come out in this one with I think it's going to be a close game, but I think you'll get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, the London Derby, Palace always get up for the London Derby, and again, they've got a lot to prove this season after winning the FA Cup and then not getting into the Europa League, which again, just an absolute criminal decision by UEFA. No one should be surprised because they're up in that stratosphere of corruption as FIFA and, the Olympics and, the NCAA. But like you said, Palace always find a way to get up for this game, and this week's going to be no different. However, this Chelsea team, they looked so good in the second half of the season and then carried that over to the Club World Cup and absolutely pummeled PSG. Now, our friends across the pond would have you believe that the FIFA Club World Cup was a glorified preseason tournament. tell you what, man, I watched a lot of those games.
Yeah.
No one was taking those games lightly, especially the South
Yeah.
American teams, and then especially in the final when Chelsea just blew PSG off the field. And if you look at who they had to run through, they played a lot of South American teams to get to that point. They played Palmeiras, I think they played Botafogo. Like it was a good run to get them ready for where they need to be for this season. Now, will they eventually run out of gas because they're in the Premier League and they're kind of expected to compete for at least top four this year, maybe an outside run at the championship. They're going to be in Champions League. They'll have FA Cup. They'll have Carabao Cup. There's going to be a lot of games. They've built a huge squad, and it's been part of their model over the last couple of years to kind of withstand all those extra games. But they've got to start somewhere. At the Bridge last year, they weren't great. They haven't been a great team at the Bridge the last couple of years. Good, but not anywhere where it probably should be. But I think they're just too much for Palace. It's going to be what's really interesting to me is who's going to start in this game because they built such a huge squad. You know, they brought in guys. They brought in Esteval, like guys like Esteval, like that is they brought in from the Brazilian club that he was with. I can't even remember which one it was now.
I think it was Palmeiras.
Was it Palermo's? Yeah, and
So.
they just brought in Hato from Ajax. They brought in João Pedro from Brighton, who's probably going to start on the left side now.
Yeah, I think he's going to start.
Yeah, I think having him on the left and Pedro Neto on the right, and then Liam Delap as the 9 with Cole Palmer playing behind him as the 10 is probably the way they'll start up front. But you've got so many bodies that you're going to have to feed. But yeah, first game, I think Chelsea's just too much, and I think they beat Palace.
Yeah, I like almost the aspect of that as your preseason tour because it was so competitive. You're building confidence coming off of that, and you're putting yourself up against bigger competition.
Yeah.
And then the last game of the weekend, Saturday, is going to be United taking on Arsenal. We got such a tough run first 5 games of the season. It's going to be so frustrating, honestly. Arsenal I have up there as contending for a title with Liverpool, so I think they're just such a stacked and solid squad. They got so much young talent within the squad. They've added Gyökeres, they've added a lot of other great players to them to just build into that depth. United, while we've made some great signings throughout the offseason, as I was touching on earlier, I think there's just going to be a little bit of a struggle for those 3. Sesko just got to the team. I think he's only had this week to train with the squad. I don't even know if you'll start Sesko or if you start Haaland or even Xerxes. I think he's still not up to fitness from his injury. I think United's biggest issue is going to be through the middle of the park, and that's why I think if it'll be a big difference on whether they sign Baliba from Brighton as compared to what the season could be or not. Casemiro, all the talent in the world, legs are just not. They're just slowly fading out on him, and he doesn't have the speed and the quickness. Even throughout preseason, you were seeing a lot of late lunges out at tackles, and you could tell it's just the player got the step on him in there. Ugarte, I just haven't really rated very highly as far as that goes, to be able to really sit there and help control the middle of the field and help Bruno out the way he needs to. And then Mainu, while I think he's got all the talent in the world, and I think one day he is going to be that player, I think he's still developing. I know he bulked himself up throughout this offseason, and he looks great. I just still think the consistent factor with him still needs to grow a little bit, and he needs to develop a little bit more in this game. So unfortunately, even though it's at Old Trafford, I'm struggling to think that I think the problem is if this game would have been maybe mid-season, where a lot of these new guys could be into this system and really get to flowing in full fitness, like seeing Mbeumo so far, he just looks a little bit overweight and out of shape so far in this early season. I think he's going to click on and be great for us throughout the year, but I just think it's as we said, early season, trying to get yourself ramped up. I think who's talent-wise and maybe a little bit ahead as far as that goes, just overall, I think Arsenal's it. And so, unfortunately, I think Arsenal's going to come out with a victory. I think it's going to be a close game because I think both teams always get up for the old rivalry of Arsenal and United. I think both teams still get up for that. I just think early on, I think talent puts you a little bit ahead in that race. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I think Arsenal's going to take that one.
Yeah, I would say Arsenal have the edge in this game. I think that the additions that United have made are good on the front end, like good to potentially very good, depending on what you get out of somebody like Acuna, who can um, kind of an enigma of a player. You know, kind of make some boneheaded decisions,
Hmm.
but also just kind of be beautiful with the ball. Um, the biggest problem with United is the engine room. And if you start the season with Casemiro next to Bruno Silva as your midfield, you're going to be in major trouble. Um, that's a major problem if you're asking those two to come back and defend. And that, like Bruno will try, but he's just not. That's not the type of player that he is. And not addressing the keeper issue yet. I think that Onana is too. He's just too volatile back there. You know, he just
Well,
makes.
he's not even going to be able to start. He's still dealing with the injury, and
Yeah.
so it's
So
like you want to sign a keeper, but then nobody wants Onana because
yeah,
he's injured,
yeah.
and
But
so you're
but if we're
trying to get
just
value
but
out
if
of him.
we're just talking week one, I think I'm with you. Arsenal have the talent and they've made some good signings in the offseason to where they should win this game. However, week one, Old Trafford, I really think that Amorim is a good manager, and I think he's going to have Man U not in a position to compete for top four, but I think that they're going to be probably in that 5, 6, 7, 8 spot. They're not going to be even close to the relegation zone. I think he's too good of a manager for that. I think some of these players have too good of a pedigree. I think Man U have had a low key decent offseason other than addressing the most important part of the pitch for them. So Arsenal
Yeah,
week one, but Man United on the upswing.
yeah. So last thing we'll do as we finish out, just kind of a quick lightning round kind of deals. We'll go through kind of some predictions as far as just the overall of the league goes. So just real quick off the top of your head, who you got winning the league?
As much as it pains me to say it, I feel like Liverpool it's their league to lose this year.
Yep.
You know, I like I said, I think something is broken at Man City. I don't think Chelsea are ready to make that jump. I think Chelsea are much more of a team that's built to entertain and to sustain and to play a ton of games and be competitive in multiple competitions than actually go for that actual gold. Yeah. So and then Arsenal are Arsenal. They're the world class bottlers. So
Mhm.
I think that that's how the season will probably finish. I think Liverpool 1, Man City 2, Chelsea 3, Arsenal 4 is what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm unfortunately with you. I think Liverpool's only added to their strength from last year, and they won pretty comfortably. I know it was a weird year for a lot of clubs, but I just think it's still going to be Liverpool's league to lose. You answered kind of my next question, who you had for the top four. I have those same players, same teams. I just have it as Liverpool, City. I'm more torn between a second and third. I don't know if City or Arsenal are going to be in top two or three. So I got City, Arsenal, and then I got you guys finishing in fourth. I think you've really been on an upswing. I think if Newcastle could have kept Isak and added to their squad, I think it would have been a
Yeah.
real good challenge
Agreed.
between you two. But it sounds like Newcastle has dropped off out of that race in there. Who you got winning the Golden Boot?
Man, it's tough. I think that man, it all depends on who is going to be. It all depends on if Arsenal are able to get, or not Arsenal, excuse me. It all depends on if Liverpool are able to get Isak. I think at Isak playing at that 9 spot with Salah on his right and Gakpo, or I guess it could be Ekatike on his left. I think whoever ends up in that 9 spot could be the Golden Boot winner. You know, there's always Erling Haaland.
Mm-hmm.
That's a safe pick. Yeah, I don't know. Chelsea don't have somebody that's going to threaten for 25, 30 goals.
Mm-hmm.
Neither do
Yeah.
Arsenal. I mean, I guess it's Erling Haaland just because that's what he does. He bangs in goals, and City are going to find a way to increase their output. Maybe a dark horse from a different team with it. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a dark horse. It doesn't feel like there's anybody like that can come out of nowhere and score like 25 goals that are outside the top four.
Yeah. I'm going to go Holland just strictly because I think Liverpool has almost too many weapons. And I think
Yeah,
all those guys are going to be, their top three are going to have double digit goals. Where I think, City, especially like last year, really relied on Holland to have
yeah,
multiple goal games. And it's that whole offense is just set up to find him
yeah,
streaking in the box. While he can, create bangers on his own, I think it's just set up for Holland to be the top scorer, but not necessarily in the best team.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think Holland gets that. So you've got City finish, or excuse me, you've got Chelsea finishing third in your mind.
Yeah, I think third is realistic. They feel like that. They don't feel to me like a real championship contender. I have a lot of the feeling that I had last year right before Christmas. Remember when that young Chelsea team went on that good run, and I think they knocked off Liverpool at home, and all of a sudden they were thinking that they were contenders, and I think it was Maresca that came out and said we are not contenders for a championship. And then Boxing Day came, Christmas came, and it was, they went on a run that they just got too far behind, and then towards the second half down the stretch they looked really good, but I still don't think that they're full-on contenders. I will say it is a strong team, man, and the midfield is as strong as it's going to possibly be. As much as I am critical of somebody like Enzo Fernandez, with Caicedo playing behind him, and then whoever they decide, whether it's Lavia or whether they just play Fernandez and Caicedo next to each other and have Palmer play in front and play like a 4-2-3-1, the midfield is strong. It was a huge loss. Levi Caldwell getting an ACL injury is a huge loss. I have no idea who fills in at that center back spot now. It's going to be tough. But third, they should score. Listen, they're too talented to finish outside the top four. If they finish outside the top four, they've had some major injuries, or Maresca's completely lost the dressing room.
Yeah, no, I got you guys in the top four. I think you guys have, while it is annoying the amount of depth that you've built over the years, is you do have depth. You've got tons of players to where you can stay consistent
it's a top
to
four,
handle Europe and everything.
It's a top four and should contend to win every trophy. Like should be major contenders for Carabao Cup, FA Cup. Should be able to make a lot of noise in Champions League. I feel like Champions League might be more realistic for them to get close to getting a trophy than the Premier League, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. As far as United goes, obviously I think it's going to be a huge jump from last year. I think the midfield's still going to keep them back. I think it's going to be, if we can make some sort of midfield signing, I'm going to put us in sixth. I think going for Europe, I think is going to be a realistic goal for us. I don't think we'll be contending for a top four. I just don't think we've still got enough depth as well as full talent. I think, and with still trying to implement this system, my biggest thing is I hope they back Amorim and stay with him no matter what. I think we've got to get away from this turnover the manager type of stuff. You got to stick with it. I loved Marcus Rashford's latest interview where he said he brought up Klopp. He said Klopp struggled his first couple years, but nobody talks about his first couple years. They talk about how much of a, and I think Amorim has that capability in it. So I think we need to stay with it. I think it's going to be a big jump. I think a big help also is not going to have any Europe or anything outside of that, to where hopefully we can keep the squad fresh and just focus on mainly the league this year and supplement in the cup runs and stuff like that. I did say where I think we're going to just truly try and focus on FA Cup, see where we do with Carabao, but focus on league and FA Cup throughout the year. So I'm putting us around 6th or 7th. And then last one I got for you is, who's your favorite signing that your squad has signed so far?
Man, João Pedro looks like the best so far. But, man, that Estevao, watching him run down that left side for Palmeiras, and I know some of the Brazilians they were talking about during that tournament, that there are some Brazilian coaches, pundits, players that think he could be the next one from Brazil. He's very exciting. He scored a banger of a goal against Chelsea. I would say probably going to make the biggest impact early on is João Pedro, but Estevao has the potential to be really special, it seems like. How about you?
Yeah. For me, it's going to be Cunha. I think Mbeumo is going to have the best year as far as statistic-wise, and I think he'll be our best player outside of Bruno Fernandes. But the most exciting, I think, is going to be for me with Cunha. I think, like you said, he has his moments where it's bonehead plays, but he's just one of those players when he is feeling it and playing free. He just has that Brazilian style, and he can create some amazing goals and everything like that. I honestly I'm not as hyped on Sesko as I think everybody else was. I think he's going to be one where they're looking to – I think he still has a little bit of development to do, and that's what I think people have talked about, that he may struggle early on in the years just because he is a player that needs to develop. But for me, it's Cunha. But Honestly, this is going to be a lot of fun. I think, like I said, we'll try and keep this to once a week. Just kind of recaps on the weekend, what we thought, and mainly just complaining about my team like I usually do. And instead of the group message where I'm getting bombarded from everybody, I'll just throw it out there and
just get bombarded
have
from me.
Even more people,
Yeah.
even more people telling me about that. And where you can do all that is on all our socials. They're the same socials as we've been doing. On Instagram, we're South End Supporters. Twitter and Reddit is _SES_podcast STL. Make sure you're checking out our Facebook as well as our YouTube. That way you keep up with all things South End Supporters. So for myself, Eric Cole, for the Monday Morning Center back, Dave Wyckoff, you've been listening to South End Supporters and United.
Up the Blues.